Welcome to the Redshirts Fantasy Football Podcast with your hosts,
John Helmkamp,
Matthew Betz, and Matt Okada.
Hello and welcome back into the studio to the Redshirts Fantasy Football Podcast. Finally, the three amigos back together. John, he was out one game, but he rehabbed like crazy. He's back into the lineup, which is fantastic. We got John, myself back on the mic tonight. Boys, how we doing?
Doing good. Hit the training room hard. Got some really good rehab from our excellent health and wellness coaches that we have here on staff at Redshirts, and I'm ready to go.
Better than Chargers health and wellness.
Way better than the Chargers training staff. My goodness. I don't know who's worse, Chargers or Redskins, or not Redskins anymore. The Washington football team
formerly known as
currently.
Redskins.
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know, man. Tough. I gotta go with Chargers.
Yeah, the Chargers are pretty bad.
It's like year after year, but hopefully this is the year they all stay healthy. Of course, we always wish for good health, including our own here with John back on the mic. So happy to have him back. Okada and I tried to hold it down on the last show. We did a Dynasty startup mock draft. It was fantastic because you know who we got on our roster? Terry McLaurin. And anytime that happens, no matter what else happens, you're good to go. So check out that. Lots of good, interesting strategy on the show. Of course, we debated picks, players, all that kind of good stuff. Tonight, we are not talking about specific players. We are not going to talk about certain values, trade targets, any of that stuff. We're giving you guys our Dynasty 101. So get out a notebook, get out a pen or pencil, take some notes. We're going to give you guys our tips and strategies to be successful and how to make the leap into Dynasty. Because I don't know about you guys, but man, I've just played redraft for years and years and years. A couple years ago, I played Dynasty and I was like, yep, I'm not going back. It's awesome. It's my favorite kind of fantasy. Do you guys prefer redraft or Dynasty?
Ooh, that's a super tough question. Is that like a, if I can only have one, what do I choose question?
You can only have one.
Okay, if that's the case, then I'm going Dynasty because it's more year-round, which means I get more fantasy. Having said that, redraft is probably more fun on a like in-season basis than Dynasty, I would say.
Redraft for me, I mean, like everyone, pretty much everyone starts with redraft, right? So it's got a special place for all of us.
Yes.
Redraft is just super fun. It's that home league with your same friends or family members that you've played in every year for, 5-10 years now. The same person is going to show up and make a mistake on draft day.
Yeah, draft a quarterback in round 2.
Right. It was like 2015, I think, in my like home redraft league, where someone took Michael Vick in the year when he wasn't playing for anybody.
Oh,
like it's that kind of stuff. Like it's redraft football is so fun that way. Those home leagues are great. They are what drives a majority of fantasy football, and it's still super fun. But Dynasty is much more intricate. It's much more it's much more of a thinking game. Like you have to put a little bit more mental energy into Dynasty than you do to redraft. So both are special. If I had to choose one, though, yeah, I'm taking Dynasty over redraft.
Yeah, I think I agree. There is something special about redraft. It's like end of July, August. Like there's just that like wave of fantasy content that comes with redraft season, which is so fun to be a part of. And by the way, if you're looking for redraft content for our show and for our product, look at ballblastfootball.com. Check out the Ball Blast Fantasy Football Podcast hosted by Kate and Michelle Majuk, our business partners. Check that out. That is all part of the equation. I love that stuff, but man, when it's like February, March, and there's nothing else going on, Dynasty is always there for you, and that's what I love about it. So we're going to talk about some strategy tonight, talk about our favorite moves to make, so to speak, and ways to go about playing Dynasty. Before we get into that, quick reminder for the listeners. We have a new logo, as you'll see on YouTube. And if you're not watching on YouTube, of course, you're doing it wrong. Check that out. We have a brand new pod logo coming at you soon. Maybe it's in this podcast. We're not sure yet.
It is.
Is it? Okay, perfect.
It?
I hope so.
Yeah. Yes.
Clearly, we're recording this before the release date, in case you couldn't figure that out. The other announcement and the reminder is we have some swag that is for sale on the site. T-shirts are now available, $20 per shirt, free shipping included. I think it's a great deal. Help support the site, help support the show, help us pay our writers. We really do appreciate all of you out there for doing that. All right, guys, no news on tonight's show. We're going to skip that. We're going to get right into our Dynasty tips. Let's start with Okada, and we're going to keep these kind of quick. We're going to try to get to a lot of different tips, maybe a short discussion if we feel like it's warranted. But other than that, man, let's just give the people what they want. Let's give them their info. Okada, hit me with your first tip here for Dynasty players.
All right, so a big part of why we want to do this podcast is to help redraft players who've never played Dynasty get into Dynasty, or if you just got into your first leagues, you know, the last month or two, what are you going to be doing? And if you want to be a commissioner, how do you set up your leagues, things like that. This is one of my favorite tips because it's a counterintuitive tip, which is to join a league or start a league with hardcore, smart players, probably even smarter than you. And the reason is that in redraft, it's fun to take advantage of your coworkers who know nothing about football, or your mom or your cousin or whatever, because then you can win the league and then next year you could start all over and it's funny. In Dynasty,
yay.
Exactly. In Dynasty, if you get with people who don't know their stuff, don't put in work, aren't dedicated to the research and the draft process and learning about players and learning about teams, the league's going to fall apart. And it's no fun when a Dynasty league falls apart. So my number one rule, if you're trying to get into a league, is find a league with people who are really tough to play against because they really put in the work.
I love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I'd agree.
I'd say don't go in. Sorry, go ahead, Betz.
I was just saying, it just makes the league more fun. Like, you just get more interaction, more trades. The waiver wire is already depleted. It becomes even more of a competition. So, yeah, I'm all about it. What were you going to say, John?
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're new to Dynasty, find some people that aren't. You know, get on Twitter. There's a ton of people. Hit us up on Twitter, and we can probably play matchmaker and get you guys into a league.
Or if you ask John, he'll just join automatically because he's John.
Yeah, I don't know how to say no to Dynasty leagues. I've got way too many. It's completely valid. But yeah, play with people that have already played Dynasty before. And if you find people that are good people to be in league with that you also feel comfortable asking questions to, or you want to ask questions to us or other people or whoever it is, it makes it so much better. Ask them, like, hey, is this, you know, what do you do here? What's your value on rookie picks? Stuff like that. It makes it way better to get in people that already kind of know what they're doing. Yeah,
for sure. And I will say too, if you're looking for knowledgeable, good people that you want to play Dynasty with, be sure to check out the Patreon crew in our Slack channel, patreon.com/ballblast. We have guys that are forming leagues that just met because of being able to support our show, which we are so grateful for. But those guys have become friends, started their own Dynasty league. Like, it's awesome. We play in a Dynasty league with some of our patrons. So check that out. Obviously, you're going to get good people there for sure. John, I'm kicking it over to you, man. Hit me with your first tip for Dynasty players.
Yeah, one of the things to kind of be aware of when you're putting together a Dynasty roster, especially when it comes to rookies, young players, which is something that Dynasty really puts more of a emphasis on. You kind of need to understand rookies and how to value them coming into the league. Understanding break ages for different positions and the impact that you can expect them to make on your roster. So, for instance, quarterbacks, if they're drafted to a position that's in dire need of a new starting quarterback, you're expecting them to start either from day one, or potentially there's a transition like midway in the rookie season, right? Like we saw Baker Mayfield, I think it was in week 6 or something like that in Cleveland when he took over. Sometimes you have them sit behind a veteran for a year, like even Patrick Mahomes was behind Alex Smith for a year in Kansas City before he came in and took over that job the next year. But quarterbacks, you're expected to make a fairly quick impact on your team. Wide receivers take a couple years for them to potentially reach their ceiling. 3 years. I'm with Okada on that. He's giving me the
breakout.
The 3-year breakout. That's exactly what it is. You don't expect them to come in and be a fantasy wide receiver once. You're not expecting CeeDee Lamb to come in this season and be Julio Jones. That's not how it works. It takes a few years for them to rise to the top of their own depth chart, for them to really get the target share acquired, etc. Tight ends, man, they're a crapshoot. Like, there's such a crapshoot. You don't even know if they ever are going to break out. But tight ends take like 4 years, it seems, for them to really kind of splash, unless they're just an absolute, freak. Like Travis Kelce in year 2 made an absolute phenomenal splash. Even Kittle took a couple of years to kind of come into scene. So tight ends, be more patient, stash them, keep them on your bench, wait and see if one of them pops. Running backs, my boys, these are the ones that walk in from day one, and if they are in a position to get the workload, they contribute the fastest. So if you have a dynasty team and you're then doing your next year's rookie draft and you feel like you're in position to potentially compete, you can load up on those early running backs, those stud backs, and expect running back 2 or running back 1 production. Every year there's a handful of running backs that end up in that range, somewhere between RB 8 and 15. And then you have the freaks that pop to the very top, like Zeke and Saquon, their rookie years, that are league winners from the start. So running backs more immediate, quarterbacks pretty immediate, wide receivers, third-year breakout, tight ends, good luck. Just roster them and see where they pop.
Yeah, I like that call a lot. And real quick, just to speak to the running backs, I wish I had the stat in front of me. I remember referencing it on a previous show. There's been at least 2 rookie running backs that finished in the top 24 at the position. I think it's like back to like 2015 or something like that off the top of my head. So every year rookie running backs produce. So to your point, it happens early, it happens often. And I was going to go next in kind of in my tip, but you mentioned the tight end position, and Okada has one that actually is very relevant to that. So I'm going to go back to Okada, let him talk about why he wants to value tight ends so highly in Dynasty.
Yeah, I was going to, once it got back to me, go with that tip and follow up on John. Now I can do it immediately. So mine, it's a little bit of a 2-parter, which is cheating, as per my norm. Classic. But target tight ends early in your startups and often in your rookie drafts and late in your startups. And this is the reason why. Tight ends is the hardest thing to acquire and get success out of in a dynasty league. One of the reasons is what John mentioned, is that they do not develop quickly, and it's harder to scout them when they're first coming into the league, because the college tight end position is usually pretty different from what we're now seeing in the NFL. And so it's hard to find the guys who are going to transition into fantasy relevance quickly, which means you need to have a guy in your startup that you can trust, and then you need to be prepared for when that guy is gone. And so I like to go early with, maybe if I can't get Kittle or Kelce, which I'd like to do, I'm going for one of the top 5 or 6 guys probably in my startup, almost guaranteed. And then when you get later in your draft, pick a bunch of young guys. And every year in your rookie draft, look for a couple tight ends in the 3rd, maybe even 4th round, maybe the 2nd round if they're one of the higher guys, like a Cole Kmet. I really like. You can get him in the early 3rd probably, so you don't even have to. But stash up those rookies so that you have a little conglomeration of 4 or 5 young tight ends on your bench, or even in your taxi squad, which is something we'll talk about in a little bit, so that when your main guy is gone, you still have tight ends to choose from, and you're not left spending massive capital to trade for one.
Yeah, I love that call. And we did that on the mock draft we did on the last episode. To go back, check that out. We took Kittle in the 2nd round for this reason. We said you got to be aggressive with these tight ends. In Dynasty, way more than redraft, it's such an advantage to have these tight ends on your roster, because the waiver wire essentially doesn't exist, right? Like you can't actually go out and get a startable tight end on your waiver wire in Dynasty, where in redraft, you can stream and it's no problem at all. So we love that call. We took Kittle and Gesicki as R2 in Dynasty, and I love that strategy. I do it all the time. John, did you have a point to add there?
Yeah, you guys got Kittle and Gesicki in that mock.
Yes,
we did.
That's so on brand. That's fantastic.
Oh yeah.
One thing I wanted to say, I want to just take a quick pause and back all the way up to Dynasty 101. You're going to be doing a startup draft when you join a Dynasty league. That is going to include most likely just veterans, or at this point in the year, it'll be a veteran plus rookie. Every year, what happens is you have a supplemental rookie draft that's either 3 to 5 rounds, depending upon your league setup. You're going to go through, your roster is going to inflate after your rookie draft, and then after your rookie draft, you will have a cut down date where you then need to cut your roster back down to size after those rookie drafts. So just to back it up in case people aren't familiar with that setting and what that looks like, you're going to have a startup draft, and then next year after the NFL draft, you will then have a rookie draft somewhere in the spring to summer months.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification there, Johnny Poo. I would like to take this conversation to the next segment there, which for me is your Dynasty league should have a taxi squad. Every league should have this, and here's why. So what a taxi squad is, essentially, if you draft these rookies, like John said, you have these 2 separate drafts where each year you just do a rookie draft. These guys, like John said, they take a while to become relevant for fantasy. So if you're not going to allow someone to have a taxi squad where you can house these rookies and wait for them to actually become a startable asset on your roster, you basically either have to hold them and waste a roster spot for 6 years for someone to never become relevant, or you have to drop them in year 2, and then all of a sudden they blow up in year 3 or year 4, like you guys said, with the tight ends and wide receivers. So if you don't have a taxi squad, you're really limiting the importance of a rookie draft. Like the 3rd round pick in a rookie draft, the 4th round pick in a rookie draft matter way more if you have a taxi squad. If you don't, to be honest, they're kind of irrelevant because you can't really keep those guys on your roster. You just have way too many veterans that are probably more likely to produce that year or the year after. So I think a taxi squad is super important because you can get guys that are late breakouts. You can get guys that are super deep sleepers that, you know, podcasts like us and other shows put in the work to scout these guys for a reason. So if you don't have a taxi squad, those names aren't quite as important. I won't play in a league anymore unless they have a taxi squad for that reason specifically.
Nice. I like
How long do you like your taxi squad eligibility to be? Because that's another setting that leagues can kind of play with. Sometimes they say they can only be on there for 1 year. Sometimes it's up to 3 to 4.
Yeah, I like either 1 or 2. I'm willing to play in both settings.
Same.
I think 2 allows you to evaluate what is likely to happen, right? Like you can kind of see the writing on the wall. Like this guy got a few touches last year. He's got a chance, or like he's the wide receiver 6 in the depth chart for 2 years straight. Like it's time to move on kind of thing. So I like 2 years to allow that player to fully have a chance, basically.
Cool.
All
right, Okada, back to you, man. Hit me with your 3rd tip here for Dynasty.
All right. So this one's getting a little deep divey. So bear with me if you're new. Pick trading.
Buckle up.
Yeah. So once you do your startup, and in fact, in your startups, you can trade your picks usually. But when you finish your startup, rookie draft picks become one of the most important and valuable assets for trading. You're going to want to trade away picks to get veteran players. You're going to want to trade 4 picks if you're trying to rebuild from the young squad. My tip is this: trade picks away in spring, right when the draft is getting close, and trade 4 picks in the summer and fall after the draft excitement has worn away and when football is starting. And the reason for that is housed in a core value of Dynasty trading, which is trading to buy low and sell high. And when you're heading up to draft season, picks become so valuable. Everybody's freaking out, wanting to get that rookie that they're super excited about. And then after the
Jonathan
draft,
Taylor.
Yes, exactly. John will trade an obscene amount for the 101, trade it away. And then when summer and fall rolls around and people don't really care anymore and they don't have any idea who the next draft class is going to be, then go out and get the 2021 first for a much lower price, and you'll start getting big payback on that.
I love it.
Totally
actually, that's a great point even to talk about too, like rookie draft value and the name surrounded by it, right? So if you told me 4 months ago, before rookie drafts are going on, that I could have like the 104, I'd be like, that's awesome, I'm in. And then you told me like 4 months later it was going to be Jerry Jeudy and he might not even be relevant for fantasy this year. The name and the rookie draft pick number is so different. It is so different. People want that 103, 104, 105. And if you put a name there, it's not as valuable in
do you remember how crazy valuable even early to mid seconds were in like January and February this year? They were stupid hot. Yeah, we're like, go get them, go load them up, which is true because this was a very talented draft class. But then the draft happens, and then you have players that go to teams, and you're like, really? Like, that's not the best landing spot. Like, maybe Brandon Ayuk was going to go to Green Bay. Oh, that's so juicy. That didn't happen. They didn't take a single wide receiver. So the build-up to the draft has so much more value in those picks than right after the draft happens. Get those picks traded if you're trying to trade them away and get the most you can in return right before the draft.
And to be fair, if you're in a full rebuild and you need a bunch of picks, don't trade your picks away when your rookie draft is coming up. But if just in the general scheme of dynasty trading, try to go for this kind of strategy.
Like it. John, our 2 points next year on the dock go hand in hand. So I'm going to kick it over to you, and then I'll take the next segment in regards to that.
Yeah, so mine is mostly pertaining to startup drafts, but also just in your day-to-day in-season as well. Don't undervalue veterans. You have a ton of people out there in the fantasy community and the dynasty community that as soon as a wide receiver turns 30, oh boy, I'm not going to touch him. You can't possibly have him on my roster because he's not going to do anything for me because he's 30 years old all of a sudden. When he was 29, he was giving you top 8 numbers like Julio Jones, but now suddenly Julio Jones is dead to you. I don't understand that logic. Veterans are very, very valuable, especially in that draft, in that startup draft, where in my opinion, and I'll get to this a little bit later as well, you're drafting for right now. You're not exactly drafting for 3 to 5 years down the road. Don't push those very, very valuable veterans that are going to contribute to your team right now down the board just so that you can pick up younger guys.
Yeah, I love it. And I'll take over here because my next point and my piece of advice is don't overvalue youth. And it's mostly for the reasons that you just talked about. And because you talked about it takes a while for these rookies to become something in the NFL. That's why, unless it's a running back, we don't really draft them in redraft leagues. There's a reason for that. So, you know, on paper, your team could look awesome, right? Like you've got like 4 awesome stud rookie wide receivers. You've got a rookie running back. You've got a rookie tight end. You got like, and all these rookies. And then all of a sudden you're still bottom 3 in your league. Like I play Dynasty to win championships. I do not play to build a good team, a good roster on paper. And if you overvalue youth, getting first year, second year players, and just being like, oh, this guy's 20, like, this guy's 21, like, look at this roster. In 6 years, I'm going to be so good. This league might not even be on, this league might not even exist in 6 years. So I think youth is important because you want to get these young players that have a lot of upside. For example, Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, for example, those types of players. Yes, buy into the hype, believe it. DK Metcalf, exactly. But you don't want to just have your roster be solely those types of players because the likelihood that you're going to compete in your league is very, very low. And the likelihood that you compete anytime in the next like 2 years is also very low. So you're basically setting yourself up to be in the bottom half of your league. And fellas, winning is way more fun than losing.
Yes.
Facts.
Okada, back to you, man. What do you got here for number 4?
All right. Another interestingly deep dive-ish sort of tip, and this one is very research-based because, you know, I'm a researcher. So I'm going to actually give you guys a couple of websites as part of this tip, which is getting super specific. But get to know NFL contracts, specifically when they're going to be up, when a player's dead money is there or not there, because that is going to be a huge telling point for where the value is going to be for those players. So if you want a couple sites, overthecap.com and Spotrac, SPOTRAC.com. Both those sites have every NFL contract on them, and they have pretty nice little tables that show the upcoming contract years, what amount of money is guaranteed, what will be the dead money if the team cuts that player. And if you learn how to use that and research that a little bit, then it means that you're going to be able to look, okay, 2 years from now, X player's deal is going to be up and he's going to have to go to another team. Whereas the Austin Eckler, let's say, as an example, just signed a new contract. I feel good about him for a few years, and you can use that to affect the valuation of players. So if you're looking at a Derrick Henry or a Kenyon Drake and you realize that they're in the last year of their contract or in a franchise tag year, you're going to understand that there's maybe a little bit of value that's lost there. Whereas if you're looking at Ezekiel Elliott, who just signed a massive deal, you're going to feel great about him as a more long-term asset. So get to know contracts a little bit. You don't have to, you know, understand all the money, but just study those sites a little bit. And when you're talking about trading for or trading a player or when to draft them, take a look at those contracts and see how it might play into the player's value.
Yeah, let's talk about the veteran that I just mentioned, Julio Jones. Everyone's panicking because he's 30 and thinks that Calvin Ridley is going to take over. How much longer is Julio under contract in Atlanta?
3 or 4?
4
more seasons.
Yep.
Yeah.
4 more seasons.
He's there,
he
man.
is a over $10 million dead cap hit to that team if they lose him. He's not going anywhere. Julio Jones is staying there for 3 to 4 more seasons minimum, and he's going to continue to ball. So it's things like that that really do matter in understanding your roster construction. Just because he's 30 doesn't mean he's fading off into oblivion. He's still very talented, very athletic, still going to get the job done. So I like that tip a lot.
Yes. Hashtag forever Julio. All right, John, back to you, man. Let's talk about running backs.
Yes, let's, shall we? I love running backs, in case you didn't know. So when you're constructing your dynasty roster, whether this is in your initial startup draft or the way that you want to look at things in terms of trading in season, stuff like that. To me, running backs are win now pieces. These are players, especially when they are in their first contract, that's about all that they're valuable for. And then after that, they fade off into oblivion. It is crazy how it happens. The league does not value them as much as I do. Shame on them. They let these running backs, they replace them with the next one up. They have the next person coming in behind them that's going to take over. Sometimes that works well, sometimes it doesn't. But they're not really willing to take the chance because of the wear and tear at the running back position, and because they're afraid that after logging 300 touches for 4 straight seasons, the wheels are going to fall off. We just saw it this last offseason. We had Melvin Gordon, we had David Johnson, and we had Todd Gurley all in one offseason change teams. They're now into that second home where their value has plummeted from where it was. Those 3 running backs were all at the top of the mountain a few years ago at their position. And now they are rapidly declining in value. They might still be valuable for another season, which is if you're on a win now team, I have no problem rostering Todd Gurley on my roster this year as my running back 2 to try and win this season. But the running backs are very short-term pieces. As much as I love Jonathan Taylor, I understand his fantasy value is probably 4 seasons, maybe 5. That's about where the value is going to lay with these running backs, unless they are just an absolute Hall of Fame caliber, going to be around for 10-year running back. It's very tough for those running backs to produce for a long period of time, as opposed to wide receivers, where they maintain their high-level production for much longer. So I like to build around wide receivers. I'm still drafting running backs to win right now because I play to win right now. But in terms of trading, in terms of things like that, I love having stud younger wide receivers, 25, 24 years old, that I'm going to get production out of for another 5 to 6 years. Where at 24, 25 years old, running backs are already starting to stare the Grim Reaper in the face in terms of their fantasy production.
Yeah, I think that's a great call. And the easiest way to look at it is you just look at the top 12 finishers. I'm going to pull up the list right now from 2016. Yeah. Okay, guys?
Oh, this should be fun.
RB1, David Johnson.
Let's go.
Zeke, still there. RB3, LaShawn McCoy. Running back 4, Le'Veon Bell.
Oh!
Running back 5, DeMarco Murray. Running back 6, Devonta Freeman. 7, LeGarrette Blount. 9, Jordan Howard. 11, Jay Ajayi. And 12, Mr. Frank Gore. It just doesn't happen.
Wow.
It just does not happen.
2 of the 12 still have value. Zeke is the only elite one left.
Yep.
That's it. Period.
So would you say, I mean, based off historical data, would you say that if you have a running back, I'm not talking about Christian McCaffrey, not talking about Saquon. If you have a running back that finishes like RB like 7 to 12 for one season, would you consider them to be a trade away candidate or a sell high, so to speak, in Dynasty?
Depends on the team. If I just won the championship with that on the roster, I'm just going to ride it. I'm going to ride it the next season and see if I can repeat and see if they hold on for another season. If I didn't, if I was in the middle of the pack with an RB7, like a Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon, something along those lines, yeah, I'll sell that away for a Miles Sanders plus easily. I have no problem doing that. I just posted on Twitter tonight Julio Jones, I feel like, is going to be more fantasy elite longer than Nick Chubb and Joe Mixon. I truly believe that he's going to hold 3 more years of wide receiver 1 value, and those two are probably going to fade off in the next 2 years.
I mean, based off the historical trends, you're not wrong. Like, even though their age is so different, running backs, man, they just don't last in this league. Your running back roster in Dynasty should change rapidly, often, because that's what happens in the NFL. And if you're holding on to a guy for 5 years, eventually they're going to be worthless on your team. So you have to kind of adapt to the NFL. Fellas, let's pause for a quick word from the sponsor of tonight's show. We've been talking about winning championships, and if you're going to win a championship in your Dynasty League, you have to have a trophy. And if you don't, you are doing it so wrong.
Does this count as a Dynasty tip?
Yes. This is my
sure.
Go check out TrophySmack.com. Guys, their draft boards, their trophies, their belts, their rings are fantastic. We cannot support these guys enough. And when you go to their site, when you find the trophy that you want, add it to your cart, go back, keep shopping, find a championship ring, add that to your cart, enter the code Redshirts. You get that ring for free. Literally costs you nothing. So do it. It's perfect. It's the great pairing for, let's say you're commissioner of 2 leagues. It's perfect. Check that out. And also, spoiler alert, I don't want to put this out there on the airwaves with confidence, but there is rumblings that we will have a Trophy Smack trophy for the winner of the listener league. So just saying. Check it out. All right, boys, on to my next tip here.
By the way, before you start, that was a pro segue, bro. That was a very, very nice transition into that.
I mean, we're professionals here.
Well done. We are.
Come on, man. Come on. My next tip is you have to know when to blow it up. If you're playing Dynasty and for like 2 years in a row, you're at like the 5th best team or the 6th best team or 7th in a 12-team league, like you have enough good pieces, maybe 1 RB1, maybe 1 wide receiver 1, but you've got like wide receiver 3s and 4s and like a tight end 2. Like you're good enough to compete and win a few games, but not really good enough to compete. And you're also not bad enough that like you're bottom 3 and you're like, I'm rebuilding, I'm out. You cannot be stuck in the middle. If you're stuck in the middle, you're going to be there for 2 or 3 years in a row. And either you're not going to compete for the championship and get a Trophy Smack trophy, or you are not going to be able to get a top 2 or 3 rookie pick in your rookie draft, which is extremely valuable. So if you're finishing like right around 6, 7, somewhere in there, and it's been 2 years in a row, it's time to look at your roster, look at your veterans that are valuable to another roster in your league that is trying to compete. And like Okada said, go ahead and get rid of those veterans in season because they're more valuable to a team trying to make that push for the championship. Don't be stuck in the middle. You either got to be in the top 3 or 4 or bottom 3 or 4. Anywhere in between is no bueno, my friends.
Yeah, I really love this tip because I feel like it is a classic fear of new Dynasty players that blowing it up is just going to feel awful and it's going to suck for 3 years. They're going to be wallowing in the misery of a trash team. It is fun.
It's
to
so
blow up
fun.
A roster.
I love
go
it.
out there and acquire a ton of picks and then smash your rookie draft and have all these young guys on your team and then watch them grow. It is honestly super fun. I recommend if you are, just getting into Dynasty and maybe you can't launch your own league, go out and look for orphans.
Take an orphan, yeah.
Yes, which are teams where players, often because they've gotten so bad, but for whatever reason, in a league have left that league and that league is looking to replace them. Usually those teams are not good. Go and take it over and try to rebuild it. It is honestly a very rewarding experience and something you guys should tackle with hope and joy.
To go on to Okada's coattails on that one, for what he was talking about earlier, in season, you've got veterans on your team, and when they post an insane week,
yes.
Adam Thielen has 14 catches for 160 yards and 2 touchdowns against Detroit, which could happen
easily
in the NFC North.
Which will happen.
Which will happen in the NFC North with the amount of targets he's going to have. Very possible. When Adam Thielen does that, you go out and you sell him for a young wide receiver and a first in 2021. You hold on to that first to a playoff team. Yes, you hold on to that 2021 first, and then you sell it in February for like 2 firsts, and you're just keeping the machine rolling and just turning it over.
Getting hot in here.
So much fun. It's just a blast. Like, I love those. Those rebuilds are They're not arduous. It doesn't suck. It is so much fun to reconstruct a roster.
Yeah, totally. And we talk about these GMs making silly moves all the time. Like in Dynasty, you are the GM. So if you're like, man, Bill O'Brien just traded away DeAndre Hopkins, that was dumb.
Identify the Bill O'Brien of your league.
Tip number 8: identify the Bill O'Brien in your league and go take advantage. No, but in all seriousness, we critique these guys all the time, right? But they're way smarter than us. In Dynasty, you can actually become that type of person and that type of owner of your league, and really try to be like, okay, I'm going to go get value. I'm going to trade away this veteran, et cetera, et cetera. It is a ton of fun. I want to steal this quote. I think it's from Rich over at Dynasty Nerds, good friend of the show. That dude's awesome. Go check out their podcast if you haven't already. He always says, in Dynasty, even when you're losing, you're winning. Because when you lose, you're getting the 101 or the 102 or the 103. And as we talked about, those picks are very, very valuable. All right, Okada, back to you, man. Hit me with, what is this, number 5?
5. It's my last tip because I did a double up. So
you did.
All right. This honestly is probably one of my most important ones, if not my most important one. So I saved it for the finale. Understand rookie draft tiers. And this is what that means. So like John explained earlier, you've got your startup, you get all your veterans. Then either this year, if you do a draft with no rookies in your startup, or next year in 2021, when you hit your rookie drafts, you're going to be heading into this rookie draft. It's really exciting. You get 10 or 12 picks in a round, and then it continues in the same order. It's not snake draft like a typical redraft league.
Yes.
And what happens is that based off who is drafted, where those players were drafted in the NFL draft, what teams they went to, and what kind of scouted talent they had, they are going to fall into usually pretty distinct and largely separated tiers. And the temptation, because it's what you usually see in a redraft league, is that the difference between the 109 and the 203 is pretty small. And the difference between a second round and a third round pick is pretty much nothing. And the difference between a fourth and fifth round pick is nothing. That is not the case in a rookie draft. There are massive tier breaks after very small groups of players, to where, in this year's draft, if you're not playing in a super flex, you've maybe got 3 or 4 running backs and a couple wide receivers, and they may not even fit into that tier. And then it's complete avalanche, waterfall, pick your nature drop off to the next tier of players, and they are so much less valuable. And then there's like this year in particular, there's a group of players that go into the kind of the mid-second maybe.
Yep.
And then there's a massive drop-off, and everyone else after that is a crapshoot. You need to figure out those tiers and understand those tiers. Now, it's really hard to do if you're a new player, if you don't know the rookies, if you don't follow the draft super, super close. It's going to be hard to do. Fortunately for you, have Redshirts Dynasty podcast. So you come to us and we'll break it down, or any number of other great Dynasty podcasts and Twitter follows. Get the information that you need to get from those people to understand where those tier breaks are. And then out of that, trade in and out of those tiers as it makes sense. So if you have a pick 2 or 3 spots behind the end of that tier, trade up into it, even if it's going to cost you a lot, because you know that the value break is worth that. And if you have the last pick in a tier and you don't really need it for whatever reason, and you know that someone wants to come get it, same thing, trade it away. Understand those tiers and capitalize on them. All of Dynasty really is capitalizing on value, and this is an important part of that.
Yeah, that's a really great one. It looked like the top 6, top 7 were all going to be lumped together, super studs. Everyone loved them in February. And then the NFL draft happened, and in a super flex league, where you're looking at quarterbacks being much more valuable, there was like a top 4 where it was in some order, however you want to order these top 4, Jonathan Taylor, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Joe Burrow, and Tua Tagovailoa was your top 4 ordered in whichever way you want. Jonathan Taylor was mine, always 101 on my heart. And then after the 1.04, you had CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy,
receivers go to bad situations.
Yep, they went to not great immediate production situations. You had them, and then running backs that went into potential timeshares, like Keyshawn Vaughn, J.K. Dobbins, and
Cam Akers.
Cam Akers, thank you.
Is to win his job.
And then after that, you had wide receivers that were going
tons of wide receivers.
Tons of wide receivers, like 7 in a row.
Big fat tier.
That were basically, we don't know what the role is going to be from day one. Rank them how you wish. So I love that. Understanding the tier breaks and how they're going to change throughout the year. Everyone says that there's going to be 30 stud rookies in December. There's not going to be 30 stud rookies.
Spike.
It's not going to happen. So it's a continuous process of jockeying for position depending on what you need, what you want, how close you are to competing, if it's better to trade down and get more value, etc. So that's a really good pick.
That sounds super, super complicated. The only way I really know how to correct that is just if you just pause the podcast and hit subscribe on the Redshirts Dynasty podcast.
Yes.
Problem solved. We're going to do the homework.
We will give it all to you.
So,
yes.
Also, subscribe to patreon.com/ballblast, get in the Slack, and then you can ask us. You can say, my pick is right here. What do I do? That is the number one tip of this entire podcast. Get in the Patreon and get in our chat.
A great value.
We helped a lot of drafts. We helped a lot of drafts this year.
Facts.
Yeah,
it was fun. A lot of fun. Yep.
Yeah, for sure. All right, man. I'm going to steal the next one, John, and then I'm going to kick it over to you because I want to talk about more rookies. And, I feel like in Dynasty, like we talk all about these rookies. We spend so much time scouting them, their advanced analytics, their tape, their situation, their landing spot.
Breakout age.
Yeah, the whole 9. And it matters. But then the season comes, and as we talked about, these rookies take time to develop. That's why we have taxi squads, etc. That's why you understand when they're supposed to break out. And then the calendar turns, it's January, and we're already looking at the next class, and people do not care about what happened last year, right? Sure. I mean, you see it all the time. The post-hype sleeper is so real in Dynasty. These rookies come out, they have an okay year. Maybe they put up like 500-600 receiving yards, and people are like, oh, that's not very good. Like, I'm done. They sell them too early, and then all of a sudden they blow up in someone else's roster. You cannot give up on rookies too early. That is why Okada was screaming from the rooftops, trust Mike Gesicki, just stay with him. He's a tight end. John said it takes a couple years, 3, maybe 4. Last year we saw it. The first year was awful. He was so bad. Like, didn't even do anything. Last year he was the tight end 8 down the stretch. This year we are ranking him as such in redraft leagues. I am, at least. And obviously we love him in Dynasty. So there's a reason that it takes time. There's a reason you have taxi squads. Don't give up on the rookies too soon. And remember, whatever you believe, like whatever your philosophy is or whatever your evaluation of a rookie is, that doesn't change after 7 games. Like that still is the same as it was 6 months ago. So you can't give up on these rookies too soon. Play the long game. Stay with these rookies. They will become valuable eventually. And if not, then it's time to move on. But don't give up in year 1.
Even John, Even Ezekiel Elliott, who burst onto the scene in his rookie season, came out, was absolutely phenomenal, was a top 4 fantasy running back, I believe, in standard scoring, something along those lines his rookie season. He still took a month to get his feet under him in the NFL. Like, it does take these guys some time to adjust. And a month is very, very short. Some others take a season, 2, to really adjust to the speed of the game, especially this year with this weird offseason that we're having because of COVID. Give these rookies a long leash. Let them get adjusted to the NFL, to the playbook, to the scheme, to the language, to all of it. Give them time. Don't panic on the young ones. So I'll go into my next one from there. I kind of mentioned it earlier, but your startup draft, every once in a while you'll be in a league with someone and their startup draft, they just go, I'm going to draft no one over the age of 24. And the entire thing is just littered with backup running backs and super young wide receivers that maybe showed some promise and a second-year quarterback that hasn't really had a great opportunity yet, like a Daniel Jones or a Dwayne Haskins or something along those lines. And that's their entire roster. And they're so proud of themselves because it's Dynasty, and in Dynasty you keep your roster forever. And I have all these young players. Don't do that. Draft your team to win right now. Like when you're doing a Dynasty startup draft, yes, you want to keep a little bit of an eye on the future. Yes, your younger wide receivers that have already shown good promise, like DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, AJ Brown, DK Metcalf, all those guys that are coming into their second, third seasons. Yes, they are a little bit more valuable. I'm still taking Julio Jones over those guys. You draft your team to win right now would be the best advice that I can give you. Take your draft almost like you would a redraft league is basically how I go about my startup drafts in Dynasty. I'm drafting to win right now. If it doesn't happen, or if it does happen and in 2 years it's time to strip it down and sell them at value, great, you can do that later. That's fine. But don't overvalue the young players and put yourself into a position where you're not competing for 3-4 years and you're playing catch up the entire time. You want to make sure that you're drafting to win right now instead of overvaluing those young players in your startup draft.
Yeah. I don't really want to say this because it's kind of sad, but you got to keep in mind that not every Dynasty League is going to make it 10 years.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of them are not. If you make it 3, 4, 5 years, that's pretty cool.
That's
so playing for 6 years from now is a fool's errand. Now, if you take a lot of these tips and put them into effect and get a league with good players and do cool setups and cool settings and the right scoring and all that, you can help it last longer. But don't go head over heels trying to plan for 6 years from now. That is a really solid tip. And if you're doing a startup, almost treat it as a redraft with a little bit of a bend.
Yeah, especially if it's a money league. If you're putting $20 in, like, come on, you're playing to win. You're playing to get that pot. Go get those, $200 at the end of the season. It's not planning for 5 years from now.
Yeah, that's a great point. And just kind of like anecdotally speaking, I joined one of John Bosch's leagues, good friend of the show, at John Bosch FF on Twitter. Great follow for Dynasty content. He puts together like these weird formats. So it was called Now and Later, and it was a 5-year league. It's capped at 5 years. We're entering year 3. Well, I said, I'm going to go win year 1 and just pay for the league outright with my winnings. Like, I don't have to pay league entries anymore because I'm still going to end up in the green. I won in year 1. I sold out. It was an auction draft. Sold out for Antonio Brown. Sold out for Cam Newton. Like Christian McCaffrey. Like paid up out the wazoo. My team sucks right now, but I won in year 1, and now I'm good for the rest of the time because I made money off of it, so to speak. So it depends on what you want to do with your roster. That's just one example, but I love that call, John. The cliche saying, right, tomorrow's not guaranteed. In Dynasty, you can't expect this league to be together in 7 years. It just doesn't happen. And with that being said, my next tip is play for 2 to 3 years and no longer. It goes with Okada was just saying with the league, but then also like these rosters just change so much. If you would have asked me 2 years ago if Antonio Brown was still going to be an elite fantasy asset, I would have said, yes, bet your house on it. He's not on an NFL roster anymore. Like things just change so much. And John talked about it with the running backs too, especially about how it just changes so often and so frequently. I mean, if you're predicting the future in 4 or 5 years and you're correct, like hats off to you. I will lose to you in my fantasy league often. That's fine because you crushed it. But historically speaking, it just doesn't happen. I like to play for 2 years, maybe 3 with those roster spots that actually can be projected out that long. Maybe a wide receiver, maybe a tight end like a George Kittle, so to speak, maybe a quarterback, but running backs especially. No way. I'm looking at 2 years, maybe 3 max. All right, John, back to you, man. Close us out here. Hit us with your last tip.
Yeah, my last tip is to understand trade values of different positions. And part of this is going to come down to your scoring formats. It's going to come down to your roster construction formats. The way that the league is set up is going to play into it big time. If it's super flex, quarterbacks are gold. They are you. It is so hard to trade for one, which is why when you're doing your startup draft, if it is super flex, get yourself 3 or 4, like
easy.
At least, if not more. Always walk away from a rookie draft with an extra quarterback. I don't care if they're going to be sitting on the bench for a year.
Yep.
Toss Jacob Eason on your bench.
That's
this
exactly
year.
the name that was in my mind when you said that.
Absolutely. Every single time. So the positional value changes a lot. Like right now, for instance, to give you a landscape view, in Superflex leagues, quarterbacks are ridiculously expensive. Running backs, like good running backs, your top tier, is basically right there with them. They're so hard to acquire right now, even for people that understand that running back turnover happens pretty quickly. They're so expensive. Wide receivers are less expensive, and I think that's probably because there's about 30 wide receivers that I would trust to give me a top 15 week at some point this
easily.
Season. There's so many receivers. So understanding that, and the trade value is not the same if you're going out and trying to acquire a quarterback from someone in a Superflex Dynasty League, it's going to cost you multiple rookie firsts and probably a wide receiver too, at least, would be like the point of getting a mid-range quarterback one, right? Like A.J. Brown and 2 firsts might get you let's say, who's outside like
Kyler
top
Murray.
4. Kyler might not be enough.
For Kyler,
you might need more to get Kyler. Like it costs a lot to get those guys. Yeah, like it's a lot. I'm thinking like maybe Russ. That might do it for Russ, just behind kind of that tier, or Carson Wentz. That would probably get it done for a Carson Wentz.
Yep.
Going out for a running back one is probably going to cost you something similar. Like if you're going after a top tier guy, if you're going after, let's say, Derrick Henry, bingo, love it. It's probably going to cost you about that. Going after a wide receiver one, though, like if you're going out for a Cooper Kupp, who's like a fringe wide receiver, you can probably get that done for like a first and maybe a secondary piece.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, so the positional values change in leagues. Tight ends, you're never going to get like Kelsey Kittle from the person that has him. It's not
unless they happen to draft Kelsey and then Kittle in his rookie draft later. There's no way.
Yep, which could happen. Which maybe do that in your startup draft.
Which is why you should snag a bunch of tight ends in your rookie drafts.
Yep. But going out for those guys is not going to happen. But going after like a Zach Ertz, who's probably going to be a top 5 tight end right now, you can get him cheap. Like the positional value changes across the board. So understand that. And it's going to change league to league as well. You just kind of got to get a feel for your market and what it's looking like. If it's a trade-happy league, if people are a little bit tight-fisted, it's going to change around. So just pay attention to the trade market in your league. I love being in a league of happy traders. I want to be trading all the time. That's my personal preference. It makes it way more fun. And I encourage you
at our league, John, that you and I played together with Kate and Michelle, a couple of Dynasty Nerds writers, Jake Trowbridge, good friend of the show. And
so
like literally there was, what was it, during quarantine? We had like a 25-day
No, it wasn't
trades.
Was it during quarantine? It was.
Yes. Yes, it was.
I don't know, because it was pre-NFL draft. It was pre-draft.
There was quarantine pre-draft.
Yeah.
For a month.
March. Yep, March.
Yeah, okay. It might have been
anyway.
It might have been that first stretch. It was like 27 straight days.
It was ridiculous.
Or something like this, and this league had a trade in it. It was just constant movement.
Like someone would post like 9 p.m. at night, like, "Hey, there's been no trade today. Anyone want to step in and trade a fifth for a fourth or something like that?" You know, just like silly stuff.
We're seeing Ronald Jones for a third at 11 o'clock at night, like just ridiculous. Ridiculous trades. It was great.
But man, it's so fun to be in those types of leagues. Trading is awesome. Dynasty is awesome. Hopefully, we convince you to make the leap. It can be a little intimidating, but fortunately, there's awesome resources out there, including our show as well as others. We have content on the site, ballblastfootball.com. Of course, locked in here at Redshirts Dynasty Podcast. We've got you covered. Fellas, fantastic show. I love these strategy episodes. We should do this again sometime soon.
We should.
Yes.
Because it's fun to take a break from like player evaluation and just talk about what it means to be in a Dynasty League. So I love it. Hopefully, listeners, you liked it too. If you like what you're hearing, drop a rating and review in your podcast app. We would sincerely appreciate it. Don't forget to check out patreon.com/ballblast. Find us on social media at RedshirtsFFPod. I am at the Fantasy PT. Okada is at Matt Okada. John is at Dynasty Beard. Until next time, we are the Redshirts.